Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Sherrard Show. I'm your host, Sherrard. Happy Monday to you, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're doing well. Today, we have a very special episode of the show. We have a gentleman, boxing royalty, actually in the house. This gentleman is a legendary fighter who's been fighting for many years, and he fought some of the greatest and beat some of the greats. I actually had the privilege of meeting him when I was in fourth grade, way back in 1983, and we'll talk more about it. The iconic, legendary Ray Boom Boom Mancini on the Sherrard Show. But before we get to Ray, the Sherrard Show is brought to you by the Pure Essence Television Network, where you can see some of the greatest episodes now trending, from the Michael Spinks interview, as well as Tim Witherspoon, the Isley Brothers, the Temptations, as well as Joe Montega, Sean Kanan from the Karate Kid, and so many more. Just click the link right there on your monitor and you can see the greatest episodes of your life. It's also brought to you by iHeartRadio. So if you missed this broadcast on television, you can also listen to it on iHeartRadio. And then lastly, it's brought to you by my limited edition Rah Rah shoe collection, where we raise money for the fight for the cure for lupus. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I was a big fan of this gentleman. He can fight. He had the style. He kind of puts you in the mindset of Rocky Balboa because he had the style, the charisma, and the look as well. And he's here on the Sherrard Show to talk about his life after boxing, as well as his illustrious boxing career as well. The iconic man himself, Mr. Ray Boom Boom Mancini. Welcome to the Sherrard Show, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, Sherrard. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. And thank you for the intro. After that, thank you and good night. I mean, what else can I say?
Ray, well, you're beloved by so many. You've really put Youngstown, Ohio on the map. But Ray, let's talk about your start in boxing. Did your boxing start come from your inspiration, or was it something that happened like Muhammad Ali? Well, how did you get your start in becoming a boxer?
People often said that I became a fighter because of my father, and I said yes and no, meaning this. Growing up, people said, "When did you know you wanted to be a fighter?" I said, "Since day one. That's all I ever wanted to be." Because growing up, I always heard about my father should have been, could have been, would have been, should have been world champion if it wasn't for World War II. He was the number one ranked contender from 1942 to 1944. He had fought the lightweight champion of the world at that time, Sammy Engard, in a non-title fight, beat him, which got him the rematch, which was set for February of 1942, but he got drafted in January of 1942. And he said, "Look, I want to defend my country. I want to fight for my country, but I just want an opportunity to fight for the title." All he wanted was a 6-week reprieve to train and fight for the title and go into the service. And he said, "I'll give him all my purse to the Army Relief Fund," which at that time was crying for money. And he said, "We don't want your money. We want you." And consequently, he was drafted. He had to go in immediately, and he never got the title fight. So I always heard about how he should have been, could have been, would have been world champion if it wasn't for World War II. Now, in the Battle of Metz, other than the Battle of the Bulge, was probably the most destructive war in the European theater of operation. My father was in combat for about a year, and he was hit with a mortar shell in November of 1944, and he was left for dead. And basically, he was a frontline infantryman. I'm frontline, man, you and the enemy. Ain't nobody in between. And he was hit by a mortar shell that killed a lot of people at that time. But one of his comrades heard him moaning and picked him up and carried him off. And so when he got to the hospital, back to the hospital in England, they said, "Well, he'll never live because he lost so much blood." Eventually he'd get through that. They said, "Well, certainly he'll never walk because he has so much shrapnel throughout his body, near the spine." And they said, "Well, eventually he came back to walk." They said, "Surely he'll never fight." And eventually he came back to fight. But he went into the number one lightweight contender and he came out of middleweight, at 135, came out 160-something pounds, So he never regained the same, the same place in boxing where he once was. But he still beat a lot of good guys, but he was basically a shell of himself. So when he retired in December of 1947, like I said, after I was born, growing up, all I heard about how he would have been, should have been, could have been world champion if it wasn't for World War II. So he was everything I wanted to be as a fighter, as a man, as a husband, as a father, everything. But he's the one who tried to talk me out of it in the worst way. That's why he's the one who said, Raymond, I had to fight. It was depression. I had to eat. He only had a third grade education. He had to go to work work right away at that time. So he said, you have so many other opportunities. I had an athletic as well as academic scholarship to go to college. I had a professional baseball offer by the Toronto Blue Jays at that time. So he wanted me to pursue all of those. And I said, no, Dad, I want to be a fighter and I want to win that title for you. What's he going to say? I was just very blessed to be able to fulfill that dream and that goal and live out my dream. So that's why I became a fighter. And it sounds, it's funny because the book, when the book came out, it sounds very hokey, and I get all that. And people, even when I was fighting, even reporters would say to me, now that you won the world title, did you really believe it? I go, yeah, man, yeah. I used to dream about it. I used to have these dreams when I was 8, 9, 10 years old of walking around the ring, carrying the belt over my head, arms raised. Now, sports psychologists in general have a fancy name. It's called positive mental visualization, right? I said, hell, I always thought it was called dreaming, just having a dream. But they always, so that's basically what it was. If you could now, if you could visualize it, affirmation, a positive affirmation, all that stuff that they're coming out with now, which is true. But it was just back then, I was just, something that was self-taught. But my mother I always just said my father was my inspiration. My mother was my motivator. Let me clarify. My father's my inspiration, but my mother was my motivation. Meaning, my mother made me believe I was 10 foot tall. My mother made me believe I could be whatever I want. So she used to say to me all the time, Raymond, only limitations you have are those you put on yourself. You can be whatever you want to be. And so I believed that. And so when reporters say, did you really think you'd be champion? I said, yeah. Like I said, I have these dreams about it. In my heart of hearts, I knew I'd get there. And, it's funny then, after I remember a reporter saying to me, and that's a nice story about you and your father, but, I said, really, what would you have been if you weren't a fighter? I said, I can't answer that. There's nothing else I wanted to be. I can't answer that. So I like to think I'd have been successful in some other walk of life, but I can't tell you what that would have been. Now, since after I fought, things happened for me and then you kind of take the opportunities and you run with it. But growing up, all I wanted to be was a fighter. And growing up in Youngstown, Ohio, which at that time was the second biggest steel producing city in the world next to, Pittsburgh was 1 or 2, Pittsburgh's 60 miles south of us, Cleveland 60 miles north of us. So we were known as Steel City. And all my friends and my neighbors and my brother, they were mill rats. They're mill rats, which was an affectionate term for guys who worked the mill, not a derogatory term in any form of fact, any way, shape, or form. But I wanted something different. I said, I can't do that. These guys are better men than me. I can't do that. And I swear to God, my father used to work at a fabricating plant, but it wasn't a steel factory, but it was a steel fabricating plant where they built steel office furniture. And I tell the story all the time where he'd get me up at 6 a.m. before I go to school. He'd get me up and he'd give me a kiss, wake me up, and then we lived 2 houses from the corner, and he'd walk to the corner to get his ride. And I'd go to the window and watch him every day. Blizzard, snow, torrential rain, scorching heat, whatever it was. And I'd sit there, oh God, please help me to make it as a fighter, please, because I can't do that. I can't do that. And so I think, the fear of failure is a hell of a motivator. Hell of a motivator, right? But I wasn't, people said, when you went to New York, if you didn't succeed, well, I said, see, you can't say, what would you have been? I said, there was no backup plan. I've learned, I tell people, and I speak to, I've done high school, when I speak to at the graduation, commencement speeches, I've done about 3 of them over the last couple of years. And the one message I get across, have no backup plan, 0. Because if you have a backup plan, you open yourself up for failure. Because if you have a backup plan, you'll back up. If you fall back plan, you're going to fall back. When there's none of that, there's no safety net. If you're going to fall, you're going to fall forward. When you have no safety net, you have to succeed. No other option. So, and when I told, I'll never forget, and I'm going off on tangents. So I apologize, Gerard.
Well, I appreciate it, Ray. Thank you so much, Boom Boom. I appreciate that.
But when each one of my boys graduated, my oldest son said, when they said, "Oh, what's your backup plan?" I said, "I don't have one." They said, "What?" I said, "My father taught me never to have one." They looked at me, and the guy said, "Mr. Mancini, I think you're doing your son an injustice." I said, "No, you're doing my son an injustice. You're doing the injustice to all these kids. You tell them to have a backup plan. You're basically telling them they're going to fail. So I have a backup." So how stupid is that to tell a child, come out of school, no matter what you choose to do, whatever your dream or goal is, you're going to fail. So have a backup plan. That's the stupidest stuff I ever heard. Dumbest shit. There is no backup plan. If you have no backup plan, you have to succeed. And God forbid it doesn't work out the way you want. I have enough belief in my children that they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out because they have no other choice. So this is why I speak. And whenever I run into somebody says, "You spoke about a commencement speech," I said, "What is the message you got? Never have a backup plan." There you go. Teachers hate it. The principal hates it. Their counselors hate it. I said, "But why? Why would you tell this child to have a backup plan?" These kids will figure it out because that's life. You have to figure out life. Life happens. Life happens. So they'll figure it out. So anyhow, that's kind of when I went to New York. There was no backup plan. I was either going to succeed or I wasn't going to go home, and I wanted to see my family. That's how my thought process was. I'm here. I got to make it.
Now, Ray, you had a very interesting time when you came into boxing because Muhammad Ali was still fighting. The heavyweight division was still very popular, and it was more popular than any division because you remember ABC Wide World of Sports and the fights that came on in terms of that. But you were able to make a name up for yourself and became very popular in the lightweight division with a lot of those great fights and a lot of primetime fights, as a matter of fact, I remember. But what was it? Yes.
No, I apologize. I want to correct you. At that time, actually, Muhammad had already retired. He had retired. You are correct. Though he came back for that fight against Larry Holmes, but then what was it? I don't know. Was it 1980?
1980.
Right. So I do apologize. But he had been retired since 78 after that. But you're right. He was still active, but he wasn't really fighting, right? But Larry Holmes was the heavyweight champ. And I tell people, boxing historically goes as the heavyweights go. From Jack Johnson to Jack Dempsey to Joe Louis to Rocky Marciano to Muhammad Ali to Mike Tyson, right? Boxing goes to the heavyweights. It was the only time in history that the heavyweight champ, Larry Holmes, which is one of the top 5 greatest heavyweights of all time, no dispute, as far as no dispute, was not the most popular fighter. The most popular fighters at that time, you have to remember, that was right after the 76 Olympics. Ray turned pro, the Spinks brothers turned pro. So you had Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, Marvin, Mike, the Spinks brothers, then Aaron Pryor, Lex Arguello, that turned pro, at 79, and then I was starting to get a little traction. Hector Camacho was getting traction. So everybody else at that time was more popular than heavyweight, and it was unbelievable. So this is what happened. I mean, just timing is everything as far as life and love, right? Timing is everything. We hit at the time. Ray was on ABC World of Sports. They were showcasing all the fighters from the 76 Olympics. All of a sudden, the new sports network, ESPN starts, right? And in 1979, they started doing boxing tournament. Top Rank Boxing. Not Top Rank, I'm sorry. ESPN Boxing. They worked with all the promoters, every different promoter. Boxing started getting prime time, network, to get exposure, prime time exposure. Now all of a sudden, at that time, you're right. ABC was the only network showing fights. But now CBS wants to get involved. And guess what? They want to showcase the lightweights. oh man, I hit the juggernaut, right? 1981, they want to do a lightweight tournament, and they pick the top 8 contenders, and they do a tournament to fight Alexis Arguello for that WBC title. And so, I mean, it was just the right time, and I had a style that was fan friendly, and TV took me to a whole different level, man. It was just, I fought previous to that. I fought one fight on ESPN. Previous to that, my first fight was March. This is crazy how things happen. I couldn't get any exposure. Couldn't get any traction. All of a sudden, March, I'm on my first fight out of the Felt Forum underneath the Madison Square Garden. So you got to start there. If you do well there, you go to the big arena, right? On USA Cable, right? And at that time, I don't think USA was national; it was more regional. But I'm the main event in March on USA. I win. I have a great knockout over a tough guy, Norman Goings. I knock him out in the second round. Boom, Don Dunphy, the famous announcer, says, Ray Boom Boom Mancini made an auspicious debut. I told my manager, I said, what's auspicious? I'm assuming that means good, right? And then a month later, April 3rd, I get ESPN, and I'm the semifinal. So we're doing a fight show in Chicago, a tie-in night. Vito Infermo, who had previous just lost the title to Marvin Hagler. Elementer. Now is the main event. I'm the semifinal, and I fight the Canadian champion, Al Ford. Drop him in the 4th round, but it goes 10 rounds, and I win a unanimous decision. And from there, CBS, Morris Charnick, CBS officials will watch it, and they offered me May 16th, my first fight on CBS. And then from then on, I took off. So it's funny how things happen, right? March, April, May, boom.
That's amazing. Now, Ray, and for those who just tuned in, we're talking to the legendary Ray Boom Boom Mancini. We will get your questions momentarily, ladies and gentlemen. He's given us some wisdom, some massive wisdom as well. Now, do you feel, Ray, that the boxing game has gotten better in today, or has it gotten worse, has it regressed? I know the money is there, making more money, but the business of boxing, has it gotten better over the years?
No, absolutely worse. Before, when I was fighting, people always say to me, I bet you wish you were fighting now. I said, what? Again, yes or no? Yes, if you could get paid by pay-per-view buys or ratings, you do. Yeah, because it's so much more money. You guys like turkey all the shake, just throw money around like it's chicklets. To guys that have no business making that type of money. But I'm happy for them. But I don't think these guys are worthy of that money because they don't fight their way to there. I'm talking about not all of them, most of them. But I was exposed to over 60 million people domestically, over 100 million people worldwide through network television. Now, if you get on a pay-per-view, I believe they said 600,000 homes, not quite even a million homes yet, capable of pay-per-view. And if you get a 2% buy rate, which is what, 2% buy rate, I think that's like maybe 600, or 6,000 homes, whatever that may be. In other words, the exposure is so much less, but the money's better, yeah. But I came at the right time. I'd rather have the exposure. I will never forget, after I won the title, Bob Arum sent me over to Italy on a goodwill tour. Even Italian promoter Rodolfo Sabatini set it up. I got off the plane in Milan, and we're walking, and people recognized me in the airport. Mancini, oh, boom, boom, Mancini. And I'll never forget, I turned to my mother. I said, Mom, this world title really means something. Really, because I couldn't comprehend the magnitude. But you forget that it's all over the world. It's broadcast all over the world through network television. So that was really something. So I wouldn't change it. I came at the right time. The fighters, the late 70s, early 80s, I think was probably the best time for fighters in the last 60-something years. I don't think there's any dispute about that.
Now, Boom Boom, one thing that's interesting is that, when you were fighting some incredibly talented individuals. I mean, Alexis Arguello was a very skilled fighter. You fought him actually twice. And you were a very skilled fighter as well. But one fighter you didn't fight was Aaron Pryor. Now, there's so many things people were talking about with him. What was the story with Aaron Pryor? Because so many fighters were afraid, they said, allegedly, to fight him. What was the reason behind that?
You know, the funny thing is, I didn't know Aaron. We, you know, later on, we became very good friends. And I saw him about 6 months. We were at an event. There was events we were going to every year. And every year I'd see him. And I loved Aaron, man. We just became good friends. And he said to me, man, good thing we didn't fight each other. I said, no, we'd have ruined each other. We'd have ruined each other. Look, people always say, who's the best fighter out of Ohio? I said, the top two from Cincinnati. The number one for me is Ezra Charles. Ezra Charles. But number two, right there, or could be one, Aaron Pryor. So I loved Aaron Pryor as a fighter. And I would have been honored to get in the ring with him. You know, at that time, it was like, you talk back. You to be an honor to get in the ring and do battle with him and the opportunity to fight him and beat him. You know, I felt very confident in that fight. And I'll tell you why. People, first of all, like I said, Aaron was a great fighter. And we talked about it a long time. And it was almost made. And I pushed for it so bad because I thought he was made to order for me. And I'll tell you why. People said, well, look what Arguello beat you. And then look what he did to Arguello. Styles make fights. He was a wrong style. Arguello was a tough fighter for me. But that was a wrong. And I fully believe Alexis beat me, but I was winning after 12 rounds. So if it's a 12-round fight, nowadays 12 rounds, that's why I tell people true championship distance is 15 rounds. 15 rounds. Because if it's 12, I'm in the world title. But the history of boxing would be changed if it wasn't for the last 3 rounds. And for example, if it wasn't for the last 3 rounds, Joe Louis loses the title to Billy Conn. Billy Conn's beating him after 12 rounds. Joe knocks him out in the 13th round. Billy Conn was way ahead after 12 rounds. Rocky Marciano was behind Joe Walcott going into the 13th round when he knocked Joe Walcott out. Ray Leonard was way, way behind Tommy Hearns going into the 14th round. He stopped Tommy Hearns. So the true championship distance is 15. For 12 rounds, I'm champion. But that's not the true championship distance. Any 10-round fighter go 12. Very few go 15. But what that fight taught me is experience. And I realized after watching that fight, I had a but Lexus was one of the fighters, great fighter, great later rounds. He created distance. He threw 100 right hands. I made him miss 100 right hands for that fight. But look, as I've watched later on, he was creating space. Little by little, I realized. And then he caught me at the end of the 12th round, tapped me on the chin, and I got the one knee and got up. Because it only takes one, right? It only takes one punch. And then it beat me. I believe the experience I gained in that fight, I knew I'd be world champion. Because you have to understand, previous to that fight, people said, Arguello, it was too soon. I said, let me ask you something. I had beat the number 6 contender in the world, Jorge Morales. I stopped him in the 9th round. He was number 6 contender, I was number 10. Then I fought the number 3 contender in the world, who fought Arguello previous to us fighting, and he fought him down in Miami, Jose Luis Ramirez, and he dropped Arguello twice, and he lost a split decision. No, he beat Arguello, but he beat him in the decision down in Miami. It was a non-title fight. He should have won. He won the fight. Clearly won the fight. So I beat the number 6 contender. I shut out Ramirez in 12 rounds. Where do you go from there? Do you say, oh, no, I don't want the title fight? First of all, how could you say, look at yourself in the mirror and say, as a fighter, say, I don't want the title? You get the shot. You take it. I just, like I said, I beat the number 6, number 3. I'm going to say, no, I don't want it. That's not how it worked back then. Ask my father how many shots you get, right? So how could you say to be the best, you got to beat the best? How can you say the best if you turn that? I mean, that makes no sense. So this is why after that fight, I knew I'd be champion. But again, experience took over. If I thought I wanted to fight Lexus again, I really did. But he fought at Pryor beat him, and he was beating Pryor early on in the fight. But then, and also if you remember, the reason I wanted to fight Aaron Styles, Lexus was up here. I'd have been down here.
Mhm, mhm.
And if people don't remember, Aaron fought a lot of guys early up, Duwan Johnson, the guy from Japan, and they all dropped him. Everybody, well, Aaron was getting dropped almost every fight on TV. Now he'd get up and knock these guys out. He'd stop them, but his chin, and he got caught and he'd go down. He'd get up and knock him out. I felt if he could put that chin against me, I'm going to be down there. I'm going to tap that chin and I'm going to drop it and I'm going to keep him down. That was my attitude. Again,
That's amazing.
if you want to be the best, you got to fight the best. How can you? And me and Aaron would have done big business in Ohio, but I truly believe I could beat him just because style-wise, and I felt he wasn't going to be stronger than me. He was strong, but he wasn't going to be stronger than me. So I felt I could back him up. I really believed that. So, but later on when we met, like I said, we talked about it and we laughed. He says, good thing we didn't fight. Yeah, we'd have ruined each other. And it'd have been an honor to get in the ring with him. It would have. He was such a great fighter.
But Boom Boom, why didn't it happen?
Pardon me?
Why didn't the fight happen?
They were talking about it, and they're talking about a fight at Cleveland Stadium. They're talking about it at Ohio. But I think what I believe happened, from my recollection, was the organizations, WBC, WBA. I was WBA, Alexis, and Aaron was WBA, but they made me and him fight a mandatory defense. They made me fight. That's when they made me to fight Bramble. They made me fight Bramble. They said if we fight anybody else, Bramble, they're going to strip me my title. See, at that time, if you remember, a lot of guys were getting paid step aside money, and the win, they'd fight the winner. They were getting a payday, extra payday. They're not, and they step aside money. And at that time they were negotiating me and Pryor and me and Camacho, at that time. And the WBA stepped in and said, if you don't fight, I think obviously Duvas, Bramble's people put the arm on these guys, threatened with a lawsuit, whatever. And he said, well, if you don't fight Bramble, we'll have to strip you of the title. At that time, the title meant everything. Now, I don't think it means a whole lot. People can say giving up titles, yeah, here, take the belt. I don't care, because I think that's where the respect for the belts have gone now. But belts still mean something. Don't get me wrong. But at that time, they meant everything. So I think that's the reason. If I recollect, that's why it didn't happen. The WBA made me fight Bramble, and I said, and my Dave Wolf, my manager, was going, we'll sue the WBA. I said, Dave, we'll beat this guy, and we'll go right to Pryor. We'll go right to Pryor.
Now, Boom Boom, was Livingston one of your toughest fights ever?
I know, but no doubt. Style was tough guy, kept his hands in tight. Style wise, it was just a difficult style for me. But the first fight, I don't want to see. He won the fight, but I wasn't 100% healthy, and I think that's no excuse. That's pretty much well known. That my manager wanted to call off the fight. The doctor said, look, I couldn't get out of bed the day before the fight. And my manager said, we're going to call off the doctor. Come in and said, this kid can't fight. I had the flu bug. And again, you don't want to talk about now because it sounds very contrite to say, because he beat me. But you have to understand, I felt I had an obligation. We sold out 20,000 seats at War Memorial. People from Youngstown were coming up in busloads coming here. My manager wanted to call off the field. I said, no, we're not. I'll beat this guy no matter what I got. Now, again, if it's 12 rounds, I win the fight. I'm ahead of Bramble. I couldn't hurt him. I was slapping him around for 12 rounds, but I couldn't hurt him. And I tell people, like, the second round or third round, I hit him with a shot. Right on the chin. I had nothing behind it. I hit him. He looked at me. He kind of laughed, smiled, because he knew I had nothing. I knew that he knew I had nothing. There you go. So I was moving, But as you can see, in the 14th round, I just couldn't keep my arms out. After 12th round, I met my trainer, Murphy Griffith, said, Ray, just move. Because I was ahead on all cards. I said, Griff, I can't. My legs are dead. And as you can see, and then the 14th round, he just kind of overwhelmed me. But even though he was catching me, he didn't drop me, couldn't put me down. And and it was like I wasn't saying he wasn't a big puncher. It was more of a steady punch, hard. I mean, he wasn't a big puncher. He hit you, steady punches. Point I'm saying is, after that fight, I said, Dave, get that rematch. This guy was at his best. I was at my worst. I'll beat this guy. I'll beat this guy. Just get the rematch. And that's when we fought the rematch. And obviously 15 rounds. And it was a great, style-wise, we were always going to have the same type of fight. And it was a difficult fight. And he got a split decision win. And, what are you going to do? But I satisfied what I had to satisfy for myself. I felt I won the fight. I truly did. Even Dick Young, who's a writer for the New York Daily News, who never gave me any credit. Dick Young was one of the old-time writers, never gave me any credit for anything I did.
Why is that, Ray? Why didn't
I don't know, man. He just, hey, look, I used to get hurt by things written by, first I'd write all the good stuff. I'd get hurt. And my father taught me, said, Raymond, why pay attention to what they write? If you're going to pay attention to the good, you got to pay attention to the bad. If you accept the good, you got to accept the bad. My advice, don't accept any of it. Don't pay attention to any of it. Don't worry about it. And I really said, they got a job to do. Let them do their job. And I realized they got a job. And it wasn't personal. And first is how can you not take it personal, right? But afterwards, I stayed, the funny thing is through the years, I stayed friends with the guys, even though they ripped me up but I stayed friends with them. And after I retired, a few of them said, you know what? I was wrong. I miss you. You were good for boxing, all that good stuff. But I appreciated that. But anyhow, what I said, Dick Young, who never gave me any credit, after that fight said, because I was bleeding bad, I had cuts, he said, I never knew blood scored any points. He said, because if they did, if they don't, which it doesn't, he said, the object of boxing hit the other man more than hit you. And that's what Ray Mancini did. He should have won that fight, So what I'm saying is, I appreciate the fact guys like Dick Young thought I would fight. I thought I won the fight. And so, but after that fight, I had no love for the sport. I had no love going. I wanted to fight Bramble, but I wanted to get Camacho or Pryor, and then I was going to shut it down. Because after the Kim fight, I had no love for it anymore. So, but then I lost the fight, and they told me if I fought the rematch and beat Bramble, got the title back, Camacho or Pryor would still be there.
No, Ray, you mentioned Doo Koo Kim a moment ago, and I remember that fight vividly. And I don't want to, I know it's painful. I don't want to,
No. I opened the door. I opened that door.
But it was very sad. But a lot of things happened because of his passing. In terms, his mother 3 months later committed suicide, and the referee who refereed the fight felt guilty, and he committed suicide as well. But when did you get to the point where you stopped blaming yourself for what happened?
Well, afterwards, how could you not? The man died in my hands. But because of my faith, I believe I have a strong faith in Christ, Jesus Christ and my Lord and Savior, and my faith in God, the Father. I mean, you pray, you go to bed, you ask questions. Father O'Neill was my high school teacher, came to every one of my fights. He was there. And the day after the Kim fight, we said a mass. And I talked to him quite often during that time. And, he was just great. I loved him dearly. And he guided me. He said, Ray, sometimes, we can ask questions, but God doesn't always give us the answers. He said, sometimes we have to wait till later on in life before we get the answers. And he said, look, I'm here for you whenever you want. And as weeks went by, because I couldn't wait long. See, my life, it's like when my brother died. Less than 3 weeks later, I was in the ring at the Forum when I fought in March of '81. Like I said, my brother got killed on Valentine's Day '81. I fought 3 weeks later because in my life I have to move on. Because if I don't, a lot of people don't ever move on. Like they mourn, or they don't mourn enough. I should say, I mourned it for as long as I had to, 3, 4, how long it takes, and then you move on. If you don't, if you don't, you're never going to move on in life. And you get stuck and left behind. Life moves on with or without you. So my faith, because of my faith, I was able to get through it. And finally, Father O'Neill said to me, he said, Ray, I said, I know you're questioning whether you should fight again or not. But if you're asking me, I want to see you fight again. He said, because I think God gave you a gift. He gave you a gift, special gift. He said, and you mean a lot to this town. Not only to the sport, but to this town. You give people hope in this town. He said, I think if you give up your career, you're denying these people your gift that God gave you. I think you're denying the gift that God gave you. You're denying these people your gift. So if you're asking me, I want to see you fight again. He said, look, I forgive you. God forgives you. But you got to learn to forgive yourself. And I was like, wow. He said, you got to learn to forgive yourself. It took a long time. It took a long time. But I was able to move on after that. But I had to make a decision fast because, like I said, so the fight happened in November. November, and I fought again in February. I had to.
Very interesting, Ray, is that, when I met you in the Chicago Hotel on Randolph back in 1983, you actually autographed a poster for us. There was the fight you autographed and things like that. It was so cool. You and my sister used to write back and forth. She still holds that very dear to her, as well as my dad. He speaks so highly of you. Thank God.
Thank you.
But I could still see that pain was in your eyes from that fight. Even, with the warmest, because my dad always talks about how great you were to us. But that pain was still there. But it's great that you moved on from it, and you've been an example to so many millions of people. They still talk highly of it, whether you know it out here as far as Southern California.
Well, I appreciate that. Look, I lived out there for 30 years. I love being out there. Again, after I retired, I was able to get into the entertainment business. People say, how'd you get in that? Things evolve. I love when people say, it's a term, I don't get it, but I understand it, but I don't get it. They say, you reinvent yourself. I go, no, man. I love when they say, well, I love how you reinvent yourself. I know what they mean and appreciate, but I always tell people, it's an evolution. You evolve as a person. You evolve from a son to a husband to a father So I evolved from a fighter into businessman, and entertainment was my business of choice. And things, it's just an evolution. So that's how I look at it. But I remember my agent telling me, if you're going to do it, you got to be here. You got to be where the action is. Just like when I fought, I had to move to New York. That's where you had to be. So the entertainment business in LA, New York or LA, but LA is the business, So I moved out there, and it was a good life, man. I had a good life out there, and I learned the business, and I got, I've acted and stuff, but I learned early on, actors, they're guns for hire. Producers, they're the ones who pull the string. They're the ones who are the deal makers. And I used to be on a movie set saying, okay, I know that's a director. Who's that? That's a script supervisor. Okay, who's that? That's the camera, that's the DP, the camera, okay, who's that? Well, that's the producer. What's he do? Well, he's the one who finds the money, finds the intellectual property, finds the money, hires the actors. Basically, he's the boss. He's the boss. That's what I got to talk to. Coming from a world where I control my own destiny, in the entertainment business, you control very little. It's up to producers, casting directors. So it was a way of controlling my future. So I started.
Now, Ray, are you still into the entertainment business?
Oh yeah, of course. Because that's why I came back to Youngstown. I came back when my youngest went off to college in 2014. I came back to Youngstown to create a studio here in Youngstown. They don't call it a movie studio anymore. They call it a full digital media studio for all digital content, series, scripted series, unscripted series, feature film, documentary, whatever. And that's how I came back. And with all the stuff that we have in Youngstown, it was I was able to get here and to get the town behind me and get involved with the local government. And so that's what we're doing now. I'm in the process. I'm in the process of. I'm in pre-production on a film project. Also, in developing a scripted series now about Youngstown, And so, it's going. But, people, I've been back for 10 years, like, oh, when are you going to get things going? I said, it's called show business. Business comes before the show, though. You have to understand, learn the business. People think, anybody go make a movie. They've been doing it over the last 10 years, Youngstown. I always tell people, where's it going to be seen? Oh, well, we're trying to sell to some, distribute it. Movies, now there's a certain methodology now for feature film. COVID, let's go step back. COVID changed the game changed the world in many ways, right? And changed business. But it hurt a lot of businesses, we know. But two businesses that actually helped. One was the mom and pop takeout places that didn't depend on indoor dining. They didn't survive, they thrived because they didn't need the indoor dining. They killed it with the takeout. And independent film, where the studios need months and months to rev up. We could do it in weeks. And the churn of content is so rapid now that the streamers like Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and all, they were secondary markets. Now they're primary markets. They are studios. So now everyone needs content. But again, there's a certain methodology that you have to follow. Where before, the days of me, you, my sons, and your sister going to make a movie and going to Sundance, those days are gone. Days are gone. There's, before, now it's budget constringent, time constringent. You got to have one star that could drive international stuff. One star name attached, and this is the key. You have to have distribution. The days are going to make money. The days of making a movie, going to Sundance, and hope for this independent picked up what they call negative pickup by a studio. Those days are gone. It still happens, but you never make what you should make. You're going to always be you're always going to be in the red. They're never going to buy. They're going to buy for pennies on a dollar. I have worldwide distribution in place. I want the back door. I've worked on formulating those relationships. So now when my project, I go to financiers and stuff and say, look, I got all that, but I have worldwide distribution in place. And
now, Ray, what film are you? I know you're looking at me. You're getting me. You're casting me for what role? You got me cast.
We're in pre-production on a movie called The Monkey's Nest, and it was in the early 1900s that there was a circus train going from Chicago to New York. This was passing through Youngstown. True story. One of the carts fell off where all the monkeys went. So they ran around all this part of town. And there was a part of town where all the immigrants from Eastern Europe came, right? So monkeys go, so they had to collect up all the monkeys and put them back in on the train, on the car. And they got most of them, but there was a couple that didn't. But one of them ran into a bar that was there, and they couldn't get it out. And if they were trying, it was like he would bite at him, scratch at him. So finally they said, hell, leave him there. And the circus left. So the monkey became part of like a mascot. And they changed the name of the bar to the Monkey's Nest because the monkey would leave. True story. So it became a popular place. And I always said, man, and then that part of town became, because all the monkeys would run around there, that known as the Monkey's Nest, that part of town. And so people from all the Eastern Europeans, that was part where they lived, right? So now I said to myself, man, I love this story, which is a true story. And I love the name. And movies are about titles, right? Because you got to have an interesting title. So when people go, what's that about? I want to go watch that. Or what's that? And that's why. So movies are about titles. So I thought The Monkey's Nest would be a cool name. And that's why. And then in my story, it's a crime thriller in the world of EDM, electronic dance music, right? Which is the number one genre worldwide.
Right.
And that's the name of the nightclub, The Monkey's Nest.
Wow.
That's the bottom line. And again, I apologize. I go a long way to get to where the story.
No, it's okay. It's okay, Ray. It's okay. We really appreciate it, Boom Boom. Now we are about out of time.
You could do a lot of editing.
That's okay. No, I appreciate that. Not at all. But Boom Boom, those who are watching, where can they reach out to you, keep up what you got going on, or even audition for one of your films?
Look, when the films here will be local, they'll be all on in the local in the industry papers, Deadline, the Variety. If there's local people around Northeast Ohio, it'll be in the papers. People will be hearing about it, especially locally. But if you follow me, my social media, my son handles my social media, but I'm Ray Mancini on a couple Facebook. I have Ray Mancini. Then there's Ray Boom Boom Mancini, which is a fan page. But I get them all. But Ray Mancini. So on Facebook, I'm Ray Mancini. On social media, on Instagram at Real Boom Boom Mancini, as opposed to the fake ones. A lot of fake guys out there, right?
I know.
At Real Boom Boom Mancini, and I think I was on which was, what is it now? X at Real Boom Boom.
Gotcha. Ray, thank you so much, Boom Boom, for stopping by the Sherrod Show. We really appreciate it.
Sure, and I apologize. If there's someone more questions, you got to have me back. I apologize that I talked so much about other things.
No, we're going to absolutely have you back, Ray. Thank you so much for stopping by. We got to do a part 2. Ray, please, real quick, can you hold your book up so we can purchase your book? Well,
yeah, it's good. It's getting re-released, and I think go on Amazon to get it, or Barnes and Noble where they could reorder for you. So,
Very good.
Son by Mark Kriegel.
Thank you so much. That's right there on your monitor. Really appreciate it. And we will absolutely have Ray back on the show.
Please. I gotta let you talk next time. I gotta let you talk.
No, Ray, it's okay. We thank you so much. We got so much wisdom and insight from him. Join us on our next episode of the Sherrod Show, where we have the legendary Ice-T stopping by on the show. You don't want to miss that. We're also on location for the Quincy Jones tribute on tomorrow. You don't want to miss that as well. Make sure you keep it locked here on the Sherrod Show for the greatest episodes of your life. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever want to soar with the Eagles, stop hanging around turkeys. I'm Sherrod. See you next time. Bye now.